Good day to you. This is Mr. Mlenga, your teacher of civic education. So we have been looking at the civil society, and in our last meeting, we discussed what the civil society means and some elements of civil society. We also looked at some of the categories or classifications of the civil society. Now, today I want us to move a step further by looking at the concept of the civil society in detail. Now, these are some of the objectives I want us to achieve by the end of the lesson. So by the end of the lesson, I expect you to be able to explain the conditions necessary for the establishment of civil society. I also expect you to analyze the roles of civil society in governance issues, discuss the factors hindering female participation in governance. Now, those are the objectives I want us to understand and be able to achieve at the end of the lesson. Now, the first thing that I want us to look at are the conditions necessary for the establishment of civil society organizations. How do you come up with a civil society organization? What do you need to have in place for you to have a civil society organization? Now, here are the key conditions necessary for establishment of civil society organization. Now, a civil society organization cannot be established and operate effectively in a country unless certain requirements are available. Now, number one, favorable laws which permit and respect the freedom of association and expression. Now, in countries where there are no laws supporting and respecting the freedom of association and expression, civil society organizations cannot exist or cannot thrive. So this is very important to consider. Now, the other important condition is a government which respects and accepts views of opponents and minority groups. So what this simply means is that for you to have a civil society organization functioning, you must have a government respecting and accepting opposing views. Now, you also need to accept, or should we say, you also need to have citizens who accept opposing views in a democratic society. This is very important to consider as well. Now, you also need to have a proactive population willing to participate in community and national activities. Very important. You cannot have a civil society organization in a community or a setup where people are not willing to participate in your activities. You also need to have existence of a specific problem. Now, this is very important. For you to establish a civil society organization, you need to identify a specific problem that you want to address. So this is what this point basically entails: existence of a specific problem that may encourage individuals to form a civil society organization to address that particular issue. Now, let's get into the roles of the civil society. What are the roles of the civil society? Now, the civil society defends the ideals of democracy by checking the growth of undemocratic tendencies in policies of government. So what this simply means is that the civil society will be able to defend the principles of democracy. When the civil society organizations identify some undemocratic issues regarding government operations, they are able to pinpoint and criticize them. Now, they also carry out civic education activities and promote public awareness on issues affecting society such as HIV and AIDS, human rights abuse, and poverty. So they are there to carry out such activities and promote public awareness. They also influence public opinion. Besides that, They also debate bills and influence amendments or decisions of the legislature. Now, when we say they debate bills, now, before a law becomes a law, it is merely suggested by members of parliament. So bills are suggested laws. Now, the civil society have a privilege to debate these suggested law before they become law and also provide their opinions. They also act as agents of democratic change. For example, by advocating for constitutional reform, gender equality, and free and fair elections. They also defend and promote human rights and the rule of law. Now, when we say rule of law, we mean no one is above the law. Everyone must be given equal treatment before the law. So the civil society are there to defend and promote human rights and the rule of law. They also promote accountability and transparency. They ensure that the government is accountable or rather answerable to, its activities and be able to provide access to information to the people. That's what we mean when we say transparency. The civil society also publicize and articulate the demands of their members. For instance, we have the National Women's Lobby Group. If you remember, we talked about this organization when we were discussing the categories of or classifications of civil society organizations. This is the women's organization. Now, the National Women's Lobby Group demands for a minimum of 30% female representation in parliament. This is what also SADC demands. So this is very important, or this is a very important role of demanding for, their members what is supposed to be there. The link between the community and the government. So what this simply means is that for information to reach the government from the community, members of the community are able to give information to these organizations because the organizations are established in these communities. So they are able to get first-hand information from the people and be able to deliver to the government. And also, some members of the community in these communities where the civil society organizations are established might not be able to get information from the government, meaning that the civil society organizations will get information from the government or not the government is rather doing and be able to give or offload that information to the people in the communities where they are established. Now, I want us to look at citizen participation. Now, when we look at citizen participation, I believe I'm talking to a citizen. I believe I'm talking to a Zambian citizen. I believe I'm talking to a citizen of a particular country, any country you belong to. Now, do you participate in the activities of your country? That's the question. Do you? Now, participation in governance refers to the level of involvement of people in decision-making process. Now, democracy means people's rule. There cannot be true democracy without full citizen participation in community or national affairs. So there is need for citizens to participate. Now, one of the obstacles to attainment of democracy is voter apathy. Now, when we say voter apathy, we mean lack of interest in elections. I'm sure you've come across, several people telling you to say they don't just want to, involve themselves in voting. They don't want voting. They're not interested in voting. Others will tell you to say, no, these are leaders, you will vote for them, they don't do anything, so I've stopped voting. I'm sure you've heard of such kind of, sentiments. Now, voter apathy is one of the obstacles to democracy. Now, how to participate in governance as a citizen. So we have various forms of citizen participation in governance. So we have political activities. Now, these political activities involve casting a vote in an election. You go to vote on voting day or polling day. Standing for a political office in an election, for example, you stand as a member of parliament, a councillor, a mayor, and the like. Joining and campaigning for a political party is also another, example of political activity. Attending political party meetings, contacting a councillor or a member of parliament to raise an issue. All these are political activities. Writing newspaper articles to criticize government policies. Now, here is an example of a woman casting a vote. This is a political activity. Now, we also have civil society activities. Now, these include joining a civil society, organizing or attending seminars, reading posters and brochures, taking part in legal demonstrations. Now, as you're able to see, this is a man trying to read some posters on the notice board so that he can be able to inform himself. When last did you read the poster? That's the question. So, if you have a culture of reading posters, brochures, even in public places, that is a civil society activity. Informing yourself, very important. Community activities. Now, these are activities that you find in your own local area, such as attending community meetings to discuss local affairs, attending parent association meetings at the local school, signing a petition with other people to express satisfaction with a decision made by a local council or a school administration. All these are community activities. In a club at the school or in the community, you belong to any club at the school or in the community, let the or school prefect as an example of an activity that you can bring yourself, Morning bricks for community projects. You voluntarily do that. You help in morning break. For community projects, if you want to be, for example, a school block, you help in morning breaks. That is a community activity. And you're able to see these are community members participating in modeling of blocks as well as constructing the classroom block. As you're able to see, these are members of the community. These are activities that you're supposed to be able to do as a member of a community. Now, I want us to look at women participation in governance. Very important. The 1964, 1973, 1991, and 1996 constitutions provide for formal guarantees of equality between men and women. Women and men are regarded to be equal in the constitution. Now, I must emphasize to say, in spite of this, women have been excluded from effective participation in political leadership and decision making since independence. Although there has been a modest increase in 1991, the percentage of women parliamentarians in Zambia still falls or should we say below 30%, which is the minimum figure demanded by the National Women's Lobby Group and the Southern Africa Development Community SADC. If we look at this table, it's showing us the number of parliamentarians that we've had in Zambia over the years. In 1968, we had only one female member of parliament and 104 male members of parliament. out of 105 total elected parliamentarians. In 1973, we had 5 female MPs and 120 male MPs out of 125 elected MPs. In 1983, we had 3 female members of parliament and 122 members of parliament, male members of parliament out of 125. In the year 1988, we had 6 female members of parliament and 119 male members of parliament out of 125 elected MPs. In 1991, we had 6 female members of parliament and 144 male members of parliament out of 150 elected MPs. In the year 1996, there was an increase where we had 15 members of parliament, female, and 135 male members of parliament out of 150 elected MPs. In 2001, we had 13 female MPs and 137 male MPs out of 150 members of parliament. In 2006, we had an increase in the number of, female members of parliament to 21 and 127 male members of parliament out of 148 elected parliamentarians. Recently, in the 2021 general elections, we had 25 elected female members of parliament and 139 male members of parliament out of 164 parliamentarians. So these statistics are simply showing us that throughout history we've had fewer female members of parliament as compared to male members of parliament. Now, what are the facts that hinder, female participation in governance? Why is it that we have fewer, numbers of female representation in governance? Number one, the cultural aspect. The cultural setup of the Zambian society encourages women to be subordinate and submissive to men. This has led most people, including some women, to believe that women cannot make good leaders. This is just a mindset that has been put across in our Zambian society. We also have lack of support from the family. Now, you discover that according to the Zambian society, women usually need permission from their husbands before they can join politics and contest elections. Often, such permissions are not given because some men fear that joining politics may expose their wives to vices such as adultery. So women are not given support most of the times by their families, especially their husbands. Male economic dominance. That's another fact. It is not debatable that there are more men who dominate the economy than females. There are more men with so much wealth as compared to women. So, election campaigns, for example, are usually dominated by male candidates campaigning against female candidates who are usually unable to raise enough money for the campaign. As you are able to see, woman here, her focus is on performing the activities or roles that she has been given by the society. These women are basically, there to provide services for their homes, such as taking care of the children, other than providing leadership, going in the bush to collect funds, instead of participating in governance issues. This is the mentality that has been, created, in our Zambian society. Now, let's get to another fact. This lack of solidarity among women. Now, what is tend not to support female candidates. There is usually a rift between highly educated and less educated women. Women do not support one another, especially those who are educated, those who are not educated supporting those who are educated. That is a rare thing. In addition, women then permit confidence in their fellow women's leadership abilities. This is a challenge. You have women who cannot support one another because they don't have so much confidence. So there is need for women to work together. Women should be able to work together and have confidence in themselves. If we can see more representation in governance by women. Political discrimination. This is another factor that hinders, women's participation. Political parties committees responsible for adopting election candidates are male-dominated and tend to discriminate against women. Some women are also just not willing to be adopted as election candidates for various reasons, such as lack of support from their husbands and inadequate financial resources. All these are, factors that hinder, female participation in governance. Now, I want to quickly run you through some examination, questions based on what we've looked at today. Let's get to question 19. Non-governmental play an important role in society. Which of the following is not a role of civil society? Is it A, act as pressure group in society? Is it B, act as watchdog in society? Is it C, to advocate for equal justice in society? Is it D, to campaign against donor aid? So the best possible answer here is D, to campaign against donor aid. Civil society organizations do not campaign against donor aid. Question 20. Dash is not necessary for establishment of civil society organization. So we basically look at, we are just looking at where we discuss various, conditions necessary for establishment of civil society organization. So is it A, citizens who accept the positive rules? Is it B, favorable laws which protect and respect freedom of expression and association? C, existence of a specific problem? D, political apathy. So the best possible answer here is political apathy. Political apathy is not necessary for establishment of civil society organizations. The rest of them, or the rest of these options, are very necessary for establishment of civil society organizations. Next question. Civil society refers to non-military, non-governmental, and individuals whose aim is to promote and defend the basic ideals of good governance outside the government. In Zambia, examples of civil societies include Foundation for Democratic Process, FODEP, the Media Institution of Southern Africa, MISA, and Transparency International Zambia, TIZ, among others. Now, A. State two characteristics of civil society organizations or civil society in governance issues. Now, this is basically what we do. So, some of the characteristics that you can point out here may include: number one, civil society organizations or civil societies are non-profit made, meaning that they don't aim at making profit. The other characteristic that we point out here is that the civil societies are autonomous or independent of the state, meaning that they are not controlled by the state. That's another very good. So we looked at a couple of characteristics in our video. Now, in the interest of time, let's get to B. Mention any two roles played by civil societies in governance issues. Now, this is basically what we're just from looking at. Now, civil societies play a critical role in criticizing undemocratic government policies. So they will identify undemocratic government policies and criticize them. Apart from that, the civil society act as a link between the community and the government. Basically, we looked at a couple of roles played by the civil societies. Now, let's get to see. Identify any one civil society organization that promotes and protects women's rights. We looked at a number of women civil society organizations. So one of them is the National Women's Lobby Group. We also have the Young Women Christian Association. So we have quite a number of women, civil society organizations that promote women's rights. Now, let's get to deep. Give two ways on how the cultural aspect hinder women from effectively participating in governance. Now, we basically looked at this. So number one, women are seen as tools in society only to be submissive to their husbands. They are only expected to be submissive to their husbands, and that they cannot make good leaders. That is according to the cultural Zambian society. Apart from that, women also culturally are expected to get permission from their husbands for them to join active politics or for them to participate in governance. They have to seek for permission from their husbands, which is quite often not granted to them. So these are the cultural aspects on how women participation is hindered, in governance. Let's get to it. Why is citizen participation in governance necessary? Suggest one reason. Now, citizen participation, like we said in our preamble, in our beginning, we made mention to say there can never be democracy without citizen participation. Meaning that when we have people participating in governance issues at different levels, like I gave you examples of community activities, political activities, all those are forms of citizen participation. This is very important for there to be good governance. Now, I would like to thank you for your time. I'll see you in our next meeting. Have a lovely day.